Also, too, one of the things I was going to ask you about earlier, that I'm going to ask you about now because it's timely, because that's what we're talking about, was, Josh Brown, who is always been a nice person to me. He's on CNBC. He put out a post in April basically just called, quote, "Perma Bears are ridiculous people." And that was the name of his blog post that he put out. And one of the things that he wrote was, I don't have the fucking thing in front of me. I'm waiting for it to load, but it's not loading. But the point is, he's taking a stab at people that are looking at things from a skeptical angle, saying that really the whole system over the course of, the last 50 years, the last 60 years, 70 years has been rigged, and that at some point we'll have to pay the piper. My question to you is, isn't that an unhealthy way to look at things? Haven't we learned, why haven't we learned that looking forward when things are going well and we have this tailwind like we have now, where everything's going up, prices are going up and everybody's happy and the market's going up, why haven't we learned that it's only until after something happens that people want to turn around and they want to point the finger and they want to ask, where did we go wrong? Why is it that, like you're saying, people that want to be prudent, people that want to manage risk, people that, and look, this hasn't prevented me from owning one of my portfolios, which is a long-only dividend-generating portfolio, because to some degree, I want to ride this wave until it until it ends. But I also own a lot of precious metals too. So I'm not saying that you can't participate in it, but why do you have to shut out completely the idea of being a perma-bear, or the idea that from a theoretical standpoint, something is damaged here, and eventually we're going to have to pay the price? Why aren't we looking out 50 years instead of 50 days?
Well, you've nested a lot of questions in there. I mean, but basically what you're saying is, what's wrong with human nature that people keep doing the same thing? And it's human nature. People never change. That's why there are never new eras, because what always happens is people get complacent, they take more risk, they get greedy, there's all these emotions, and perversely near the end, then you manage to get crazy thoughts like, the bull market could go on forever. I read that was a headline recently. You have what you said Josh Brown said. We had the Business Week cover a little while ago that said the death of inflation. So when things have gone on long enough and crazy enough and enough people have, succumbed to it, then people feel so bulletproof that they will say things like that if they had any understanding of financial history, they would know these sorts of things have happened over and over and over again. And when you feel confident enough to make one of those proclamations, it's usually near the end. Now, that doesn't mean it's in the end of the day. It might be a year. I mean, it might be a couple of years early if it's a big enough trend or whatever. But you're asking why human nature is not different, and it's not different because that's human nature. And when you put humans in a crowd, that's what I was talking about, the wildebeest on the plains of Africa. It's just one big crowd. And throughout history, I mean, you could go read Devil Take the Hindmost, or The Popular Delusion, The Madness of Crowds. Throughout history, this has happened. I mean, where there have been crazies. Now, never quite like this, and never quite sponsored by the government outside of what John Law did in France. But so you've got the G7 central banks trying to make stock markets and bond markets go to the moon to drag the economies along with them, and that's what they've set out to do. It'll turn out to be a failed experiment, but it's so huge that it lasts so long and it goes like it has, and people get so confident, and then you get people like what you said Josh Brown said, who I guess should know better because theoretically he's a professional, but it depends. If your career didn't start before like 1995, you've never really experienced anything but various versions of the lunacy we have now. I mean, it's the craziest on the part of the central banks, but you've never lived through a period where it wasn't like this. And this is unique the last 10 or 20 years throughout financial history, looking back 200 or 300 years. And again, as I pointed out earlier, when 10 years is a long time in a person's life, especially if you're a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. That's a huge chunk. Well, so that's the bulk of your experience, but that's a tiny slice of his financial history. And of course, we're not going to even talk about geological time. But
right.
So people, so it's like a human says, well, this has gone on 5 years or 10 years. This has to be correct, right? This is like a immutable law of physics.
Exactly.
Well, there are no laws of physics in finance, really, other than eventually, if you print enough paper, enough money, you're going to debase the money that was in existence. And that's what they've done, and that's what's happened. But the debasement has only come in the form of driving up stock prices. In other words, money has gone down against stock prices. Said differently, it takes more money to buy each individual stock, and money hasn't gone down against goods and services fast enough to make inflation a problem.
Right.
And people, it won't, in the end, it won't be the CPI that goes at some number of people say, oh, gee, the government said we have more inflation, now I'm going to worry about it. Collectively, the people will feel it, and they'll turn against these policies. We'll need a change in policy and some change of perception. So when the market cracks up, this year, and then the Fed rides to the rescue, and in that period, we can look to see if psychology changes. It's not going to change, most likely, on its own before that. So, at least that's my view. But again, I'm guessing because we've never been through this before.